So I worked in tech. I worked in technology, and it was in consulting. So you're kind of making things up. You're building the airplane as you're flying, that kind of thing. And so I think also for me, when I say, I kind of abruptly said, well, I think men are easier than women. Also, the men that I was working with were, systems engineers and technologists. And I came in kind of with a softer feel, more of the psychology and the behavioral economics, and that, I mean, I went back and got a master's degree in human computer interaction. So it's how humans interact with, technology. And so that was my slant, or that was my purview. And so they would see me as sort of, I mean, I was the expert. It was a division of labor. So they were doing their work and I was doing my work. And so there wasn't any sort of, especially with the people that I worked with.
Welcome to Women and Work, the show where we take an inside look at how women are overcoming our own unique challenges as we grow our careers or build a business while nurturing relationships and family. I'm Diane Mocha, founder and CEO of MomSub, the childcare app that connects you to a substitute mom. And I want you to know that work can fit your life. Our guests show you the way they've done it. Today, Sarah Wallace is joining us. Sarah has become a customer experience guru in the name, in the words of one of our mutual friends. And that's because she worked in the space for more than 20 years for brands like Blue Cross Blue Shield and JP Morgan Chase. 5 years ago, she decided to launch her own business to offer workshops and her expertise in discovering and implementing the best way for companies to put customers first. We're so glad you're here, Sarah.
Hi, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited about this conversation.
Excellent. Well, having spent years in corporate and now on your own as an entrepreneur, we know they each have their own unique obstacles. But I wonder specifically during the course of your career, both of those things, what do you think has been the biggest challenge specifically because you are a woman?
Well, wow, I have about 700 answers for this. I am not only a woman, I'm also a 5 feet tall woman. I say that I'm child-sized. Yeah. And
Hey,
so,
we have that in common.
yeah. So I think that one of the bigger challenges for me is that for being so small, I still take up a lot of space. And there are people who I have interacted with that don't appreciate that maybe as much as my mother does, for example. So I think that it's sort of navigating. I have a really strong personality. I have a lot of ideas. So navigating I guess, the bias that people have for being, female and also sort of diminutive and then coming in hot. I think that that sometimes strikes people or kind of rubs people the wrong way. So I've had to learn how to be, it's sad, but I had to how to be much more diplomatic.
Mm. Did you feel like you had to make yourself smaller? Like, did you learn that lesson? Is there a specific anecdote? And then did you later on realize, no, I don't have to make myself smaller and have a shift?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I can speak to a couple different anecdotes, where you have like your managers or whomever kind of give you feedback that, well, you seemed a little bossy, or that email came in on too strong, or that sort of thing. And so, there, I mean, with anything in the corporate world or with clients, you have to temper your performance or temper your approach. But I think that I was given specific feedback in my formative years of my career that made me a little shyer. And then I think that, I'm getting closer to, I'm in my late 40s now, and I think that there's a certain um, attitude that you can kind of have with the wisdom that comes with that, where it's like, you know what, that's your that's your perspective or that's your opinion. And as my Aunt Carolyn says, everybody has an opinion and a cowboy hat, right? So like you can take your opinion and do with it what works for you, but I don't necessarily have to adapt my life to that.
Wow. We have a lot in common. I have an Aunt Caroline too. I'm
Oh yeah,
petite, yeah, and yes, I've definitely been accused of being too bossy, not being
yes.
sensitive enough to others. And I'm not saying that those things aren't important to be sensitive, but we know that men don't get accused of being bossy. As a matter of fact, they get promoted to be the boss, right? Because
Yeah.
they take charge and they show leadership potential and leadership abilities. And yes, of course, there's a way to do it, but but women sometimes get slapped with that capital B label, and it doesn't mean that we're being abrasive. It just means that we're taking charge and we know what's best, and we're doing the things we need to do in a very efficient way, and
Mm,
necessarily massaging and making everyone feel good. And while we want to be aware of all those things in the workplace, we also don't want to diminish who we are. And
mm.
sometimes being an entrepreneur helps you step back into that more so. I wonder if when you were younger and in your, early years of education, going to college, figuring out what you wanted to do, if those thoughts played into, hey, I have this sort of, personality where I like to go in and be the boss, and so I'm going to go into this area. Was this something that was by design, or did you sort of fall into your career?
Oh my gosh, I totally fell into I'm still falling into my career. I don't know. I mean, the sort of managing principle for me is serendipity. And so I think that, kind of like you and I know each other just from saying yes to things, going and saying, meeting people, talking to people, being open to that. I have a story that I tell about, it's kind of a long story, but the whole reason why I'm in the career that I am in, with the husband that I have, with the best friends that I have, is all because of a random snowboarding trip that I went on. And if I hadn't gone on this snowboarding trip, I wouldn't met a certain person who introduced me to a certain, you know, graduate program. And then because I wanted to do that graduate program, I had to change my jobs, and then boop, 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 like the chips just fell in place, all literally because of this one serendipitous event that I did. And I think that that taught me, and that was when I was in my early 20s, that taught me just to, you know, have a plan and have an idea and have a sense of where you want to be, but don't really be disappointed if it's not a straight line, because it's not going to be a straight line.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And
And I
where
think
were you
that
snowboarding? I have to know.
well, actually, so it was a long time ago. And it was, I should know this. I don't know, but it was in Wisconsin. It was through the
Wow.
Discovery Center in Chicago. The
Okay.
Discovery Center was like, it was like literally, it was a magazine that you would go, and it was before they had an online presence, I'm sure. But I was flipping through this magazine or flipping through the brochure of what's available. And it was like a day trip snowboarding. You get on the bus with them at like 8 a.m. They take you there. You rent the snowboard. I was a skier growing up, so like I had skis, but I didn't snowboard. And then rent the snowboard, do the thing, and then they drive you back. And it's all with strangers, which is I think also kind of speaks a little bit to like some of my serendipity is I don't mind getting on a bus full of strangers. I don't mind having a conversation with. I'm a researcher. I can talk to anybody, right? Um, so yeah, back to that whole thing with the serendipity, and also I think that kind of speaks to what we were talking about before with the sort of having a larger or stronger personality. Some people it turns them off, and some people they're really into it. So I think that it's almost like a nice weeding tool too. That personality is like, well, who am I going to be friends with? I'm going to be friends with people who can handle a strong friend. Who am I going to do work with? Can do work with people who can handle having a strong colleague, or a consultant, or whatever. As long as I had one client, I'm sort of rambling, but that's also I'm an external processor. I had one client who told me that I was undermining him in front of his underlings because I was telling him that he was wrong, basically. And so it's like, so you gotta try to like figure out, okay, the psychology of it all too, right? If you're feeling undermined by having somebody disagree with you, then we're probably not going to be able to work together too much longer. And so it's being able to sort of, I guess it goes back to that the sort of wisdom, to the serendipity and the wisdom of saying like that's not going to work, and that's okay. We'll keep moving. You go find a consultant that's just going to say yes to you. I'm going to find a client that's going to actually want to improve.
I'm guessing that maybe it was Alpine Valley or Cascade. I've been skiing at both of
I
those.
think it was Alpine Valley actually.
Yeah. Okay.
Do
Yeah,
they have chairlifts?
they do. Oh yeah.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not
because
just
this was
a
a
tow rope.
chairlift.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not huge, but it's a nice place to go skiing in the Midwest. There's not a lot of
yeah.
skiing unless you go to Michigan. But I wonder when you were in the workplace, you were at some of your um jobs for quite a long time. So
Hmm.
it's not like you butted heads and then said, I'm out of here. You
No.
found a way to make it work. And I wonder if you had different experiences with your strong personality with men in general than with women. And which did you feel like you had to adjust more?
I think men are easier, actually.
In terms
Yeah.
of dealing with, like, they would treat you like, "Oh, okay, I get you," because they tend to, again, we're generalizing. I know not everyone fits into those general categories, but they tend to be more assertive in their beliefs, and expressing them, especially in the workplace, and feeling like they have a right to sort of step into roles. They say, men apply for jobs where they only fit like 50 to 75% of the qualifications, and women generally don't unless they fit like 100%. So they feel not even entitled, but just maybe have a confidence in the workplace that they belong, and I'm the provider and I should be getting the raises and the responsibilities, and that's just what I do as a man. And even though society has changed in a lot of ways, there's still a lot of tradition to it, and we go swing back and forth depending on what the zeitgeist is currently, right? And so what were your interactions with women? Did it surprise you because you had to then acknowledge, well, there's a lot of women that aren't like me? And then what did you do, or not do, to accommodate? And was it different when you were dealing with a woman boss versus a woman that was reporting to you?
Yeah. Well, I think that so some of the generalizations that I mean I completely agree with. And then some of them I can think about people specifically that like don't fall into so it is, it's a generalization. But I worked in tech. I worked in technology, and it was in consulting. So you're kind of making things up. You're building the, airplane as you're flying, that kind of thing. And so I think also for me, when I say, I kind of abruptly said, well, I think men are easier than women. Also, the men that I was working with were, systems engineers and technologists. And I came in kind of with a softer feel, more of the psychology and the behavioral economics, and that, I mean, I went back and got a master's degree in human computer interaction. So it's how humans interact with, technology. And so that was my slant, or that was my purview. And so they would see me as sort of, I mean, I was the expert. It was a division of labor. So they were doing their work and I was doing my work. And so there wasn't any sort of, especially with the people that I worked with clients, it'd be different, but with the people that I worked with, colleagues specifically, it was more like we were just in our own lane. And I think that with the males and actually with the females too. But then when I did have, I mean, some of my favorite bosses I've ever had my entire life were ladies. I can think of when I was at Blue Cross Blue Shield, she was actually younger than me. And I was in my early 30s. And it was like when you're in your early 30s and somebody's younger than you and your boss, you're like, what? Now we're used to it just because everybody's younger than we are. But but she was like the most encouraging. And I worked for Corona. I worked for the company that imported Corona. When I was going back to school, I was working in supply chain. And that boss that I had, she was much more of a micromanager. And so I went from there, graduated with my degree, and then moved over to Blue Cross Blue Shield. And the woman that I was working with, her name was Kelly. She was a consultant before. I think she'd been like Arthur Anderson or something. And she was expecting me to be 100% myself and not needing to call her to say, should I have this conversation, or do you want to read this email? Or she was like, go do, I hired you not to have more work. I hired you to have less work. And assume there isn't going to be a problem unless I tell you there's a problem. And so that was just sort of like, it was like I was able to unshackle a little bit. And then I've had, other bosses that were less trusting. So I think that that's probably part of the reason why I'm a consultant now, and I work for myself now, is that I trust myself now, and so I don't need somebody to oversee me as much. But I've also had male like bosses and clients that were such good influences, and I've learned so much from. So I think the ones that are the outliers, both really good and really bad, happen to be females. But then I think that that's just because they're people, just humans,
Yeah,
and they're
and who you happen to interact with. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And I think it's probably, just like specifically the boss that I think about, where you know, she was a faux feminist. And so that was really hard because it was like she came on real strong, but then when it came down to it, you couldn't really trust her.
Mm. And so I wonder, through all those experiences, why did you decide to start a business? Was this something you had been thinking about for a while and planning and then, real strategically like made the shift? Was it something that you sort of, lost a position or got pushed to the edge or, that you felt like, I have to make this change, I feel real compelled. And was it a big leap? Did you go from this nice, secure, well-paying position to like, I don't even know if I'm going to make any money? Or did you have like a bunch of clients already lined up that said, "Oh yeah, you do that and I'm signed on."
Yeah. So it's a combination of all of that, but the sort of precipitating factor was I was laid off in 2020. So I had a job in 2018 and 19, and it was a great job. It was all remote. There wasn't a headquarters. Really fun company, really interesting clients. And then I did a workshop. So I had a woman that I used to work with at a different job, and she said, give me your what's it called, your CV or your resume. And I was like, no, I'm fully employed and I'm happy. And she was like, give me your resume. I'm gonna submit you for this role. And I'm like, no, I'm serious. I'm fine. She said, I'm gonna make up a resume for you and submit this role, for you. And so I said, fine. So I updated my resume, and then I ended up doing sort of like some freelancing with a guy that she was had connected me to, and we did some workshops, and he was really fun and it was really easy to work with.
While you had
So
your full-time job and that was allowed. Okay.
yeah, it was fine. And I mean, it was just like one or two things that I did, and it wasn't like a conflict of interest at all. And they were fine with it. The original employers were fine with it. And so then the guy that I was doing the workshop with, he ended up poaching me. He said, you need to come over here. I want you to do this full time. And then they laid me off after 11 months. And he was so, like, it was really nice. He put on a suit to lay me off. And I'm like, it's okay. It's okay. It was an experiment. We tried something. It's the pandemic. This isn't, I know it's not a performance thing. I'm not feeling bad about this. So he laid me off, and then I had, it was a Canadian company, so I had a little bit of a sort of a healthy severance, and I had some time to think. And I thought it's actually really funny. Like, I'm never going to work with marketers ever again. I want to work with, organizations that are fully customer experience focused, not just like saying that they are, da, da, da. And then so I said I was never going to work with marketers ever again. And now I'm in full-time marketing for myself. So like don't ever say you're never going to do something. Like that's just like something that I've learned. Like just don't ever say it. Um, but when I had that severance, that time to think, in addition to my, hubris about not ever wanting to work with marketers again, I thought, well, I started to figure out my ideal client. I started to figure out, where they are in their journey. I'd been doing customer experience and, this experience work for like 20 something years by now. Didn't want to have to fight to do my job. I can't tell you how many times I've been like in a position where the work has been sold in, and they're like, the people who I'm working with don't really understand it. And so you have to like re-explain over and over. I'm like, I don't want to do that. I want to work with people who get it. I want people to work with people who have a budget. I want to work with people who, have a good team, and they just need like a little help. And the first couple of years, it was great. I mean, clients were landing in my lap. It was wonderful. I was, able to
Through
really,
connections? I mean, okay.
yeah, yeah. So
So
through
you tapped
connections,
into your network. So you didn't have to be a big marketer at that time. No.
no. And I remember there was a woman that I talked to because I did, I called people, and I went on LinkedIn and was asking people if I could have, 30 minutes of their time. And one woman, it was so simple. Her name is Sarah, because everyone's name is Sarah, but she said, just don't forget your network, and it was like, wow, that's so profound. And she's right. And I've been saying to my nieces and nephews since like, they were like 13, 14 years old, everybody wants to help you. Everybody wants to help you. You just have to have a really tight ask. So they need to know how to help you. And so that was kind of what I did is I figured out, well, what is my ask? What is it that I'm asking people, who are my power partners? Well, who do I want to work with? And so it took me a little bit of time to figure out. And I also had the luxury of having the clients. And I had another person who to introduce me to another agency. And so I was able to get a lot of research work through that agency and have some really cool, weird conversations. So I was going. And then it was like, it sort of dried up this past summer. So I've been spending a lot of time on LinkedIn and a lot of time doing marketing. I do webinars twice a month. And so I've had close to 1,000 people attend those webinars. And so those are all, people who are interested in the topic, people who know how I work, because the webinar is more like a salon too. That's not like just like a pitch. It's more like helping them to figure out, it's like discovery work, pre work that I do with a lot of my clients. So yeah, I mean, I'm very, very busy. I do a lot of unpaid work, and then I have a lot of, client work that comes in too.
Mm-hmm. And I wonder during all that time how your personal life weaved through your professional life. We talk to a lot of women who are A-type personalities and they're just like, I have to be at the top of my game all the time. And so if I want to spend time with my husband or start a family, then that's going to impact this. And I don't know if I want to do that. And so did you go through any of those mental gymnastics? Did you have this conversation with yourself and the people close to you? And you got married at some point, and then, did that affect, like, oh, I have to actually think about this other person and when we're going to spend time together. Maybe I shouldn't be at the office until 9 every night. Or were you the kind of person that said, I'm efficient, I'm good at my job, I can leave at 5?
No, not to the latter. No, no. And I think that, so I got married 10 years to the date that I'd met my husband. And so we dated I mean, we didn't date for 10 years, but we dated for like 7 or 8 before. And then I've been married since 2011. So we've been together forever. And when I was working in agencies and it like pre-pandemic, when you go into the office, I mean, it was 65-hour weeks, easy. And I was traveling quite a bit. And I mean, I remember one time it was like 11 o'clock at night on a Sunday, and my husband comes around the corner and I have a MacBook, and he was like, "Oh, I hate that Apple." Because all he sees is the Apple, on the back. And so I just shut it because I was like, well, that's not good, that he hates my axe, my tool, the tool that I use. It's not a good sign. So there were some times where I think that definitely there was too many hours of work. And then when I was laid off, that was a little bit different. And then my mom started to get sick. My mom has Alzheimer's, and so
Sorry.
yeah, so there was a lot of change there, and I was going back to Michigan, and then I was doing a lot with politics, phone calls, knocking on doors, that sort of thing during the election. So there was a lot of things that was like pulling me away, and then my family, my go back to Michigan as much as possible, and then I like, my husband and I do not have children, but we like to travel, so that was part of our, you know, how we are going to relate together. As we said, we're not going to have kids, but we want to travel, so that's part of our pact of our relationship. And so, I want to make sure that he is primary for me, as well as my own health and then his health and then the health of my relationship and then my career too. But it's like, I've never had a normal job. So I think that because of that, I was able to be flexible where I'm working at 11 o'clock at night on Sunday, but then going, sort of being able to find that. I was at a conference the other day and they were talking about work life sway. And so I think that that's what it was a little bit, was where it's like I'll work the 60-hour weeks, but it's like on my time, and then I'm going to fit in my life around that. And I
Mhm.
don't work, well, I don't know. I probably actually do work like 50-hour weeks now, but you know, it's all my own to-do list rather than somebody else's, so it feels a little less like toiling.
So you said you don't have a normal job. So you did
I've
a lot
never had
of
a normal job.
research and customer experience discovery and interviews. So you're saying that there were aspects of your job that made it required you to, work at night or weekends or travel. And so you had the flexibility in your workplace that nobody expected you to be with your butt in the seat at 9 a.m. on a Monday. And so if you were gone all weekend, maybe you'd go in the afternoon or you skip Monday, and you didn't have to report to anyone and like check off the boxes. You were salaried. And but to me, coming from the media where I feel like that's definitely not a typical job where,
Mm,
we don't really have meetings, there isn't like
yeah,
collective decision making, you're for a few minutes you decide what your story's going to be. When you're in television news, you run out the door and you're out all day getting your story and you're doing it on the air at night. And so not that's also not traditional in a different way. But I look at you and think, oh, well, she was in the corporate world, she worked for a big company, very normal. So it's just interesting that you qualified it that way. Is it just because of that flex, or were there other things about your job that you think were not traditional, not normal? And who else would that appeal to if someone's like, well, I want to hear more about that?
Mm. So I think so I've had over 75 clients in 22 different industries. And I think that I worked in agency where you couldn't just disappear. There was some teamwork. But I think that the reason why I say I've never had a normal job is I've always been in a position where I could be, I'm a problem solver. I come from a UX background. And so if there was something that needed to be fixed at work, I would take that on. I would fix it. I would go and we would change the standard operating procedures, or we would fix it. So, if there was like, you inherited something from the sales team but that's impossible. And so we have to fix that, right? So the sales team quits selling and things that are impossible for delivery to actually deliver. So that's, I guess, if we put it down to pay, I guess I probably have had a normal job, but it just never really felt like it because I would just do my own thing while I was doing the thing that was expected of me. There's a lot of sort of creativity and almost like communal, like, let's fix it. If there's a problem. I mean, I remember when I first started off at Blue Cross Blue Shield, this is just stupid, but it's silly. And this is what I did. There was, you'd wash your hands and you'd have the paper towel, and then you open up the door with the paper towel and there's no trash can right there. So everybody would just walk around with these dirty paper towels. And so I sent a message to the facilities team, like, you need to put trash cans in. And they were like, no, we don't have that. That's not part of it. I was like, well, there's now bacteria in people's desks and you want to keep them. So it's like, it's just a dumb example, but it was like, I changed that. Like my mom, when I was younger, she changed my bus route. Like there's just like, you change things that are wrong. And that's just why I think why I was attracted to, the user experience world is you go out there and you figure out, or the customer experience world, go out there and you figure out what's wrong and then you fix it. Like it's not that hard. You just fix it. You try it. You try something new. It's just a lot of experimentation, I think. And so that's where maybe I have had a normal job, but I just didn't approach it like a normal person. So that's why I've never had a normal job.
Well, who's to say what normal is? But I
Right.
think it's interesting that I don't hear in your description of your career, which you've been in for a long time, hitting burnout like I do from other women. You were working a lot, but you didn't feel like you had to be there. You really early on, it sounds like, made your work fit your life, which I think
Mm,
is one of the ways to prevent burnout, not feeling like I'm doing all these things I have to do and it's too much. Yeah, there's, I'm sure, times up and, it sways up and down, like, oh my gosh, this is a lot. I'm not spending any time with my husband. All he's seeing is the apple. My
mm,
husband will say sometimes, all I see is the back of your head. I'm in my office,
mm,
he walks by. But you didn't sort of hit a wall where you're like, oh my gosh, pulling out my hair, I can't ever go back to that. That's, I've been in the wrong place or whatever.
no,
So I
no.
wonder if and I'm not saying always, but a lot of times when I hear these stories, it's women who have all together and think they have, kind of worked it out the way they want it, and then kids come along and it's not just a wrench. It's like a huge, thing, and then they don't know, and you're trying to be the best in both. And so, did you have any consideration to having kids? And did your career have any influence on whether you did or didn't? And do you think that you didn't hit burnout because you had this unique kind of position that you could flex, or because of your personality, or that you anticipated it and made sure that you brought in more balance? Like, what were the ideas that went through your head in terms of family, and then what were your secrets in terms of not going through some of these overwhelming stages that other women do?
Yeah. Well, I asked for a hysterectomy when I was 13 years old. So I knew my entire life that I wasn't going to have kids. And then my mom said, no, I'm not going to give you a hysterectomy at 13. So I came back when I was 18 and said, okay, let's do this. And she appealed to my vanity. She said, no, no, it dries you out, you'll get older real fast. So I knew my whole life that I didn't want kids. And I have, I think I'm a pretty good aunt. I've got nieces and nephews. They're really important to me. But I just knew that I'm pretty good at knowing myself. And I knew that I would be a bad mom. And I don't really like to do things that I'm bad at. So that never was a factor for me in terms of my career. I do remember one time walking across the street. I was it was on the way to school, graduate school. And it was like, it hit me. I remember I was 26 years old and I was like, oh, I really am never going to have kids. Like I've been saying this for 13 years, and everybody would always be like, "Oh, you'll grow out of that. You will. Kids are great." Da, da, da. So, my whole entire life I'd been given the feedback that I was wrong about something that was so like integral to me and my being that it was like, "Oh, wow, like I actually believe myself." And I think that that was a sort of a pivotal moment for me when I was like, oh, I believe the thing that I've been saying for 13 years anytime somebody would listen to me. So I think that that was sort of a little bit of trust in, even if I'm deciding to do something that is outside of the norm, it's still, I know myself enough to be able to do that and to the betterment of everybody. I would be a bad person in the parent teacher conference, like it just wouldn't be good at that world. And so I think that that's where I am a little bit different than, I mean, a lot of the moms I don't know how moms do it. Like, I have no idea how moms do it. I don't know how, I don't wear makeup. People who are moms who get up and they wear makeup. I'm like, how do you guys have like more time than I do? You have like 15 more hours in a day than I do. But I think that there's also something that I've lost in, or I don't have, that a lot of moms have is that, um, something besides yourself, right? Like I have a dog and that's great, but that's not a kid, right? We all know that. I hate it when people are like, I'm a furry, my furry baby or whatever, and our fur baby, and she's a dog. She's a 14-year-old dog. I can leave her at home for hours. You can't do that with a kid. So I just think that I have a different life than a lot of, professional moms do. Like I have a friend, that I have a number of friends that are moms, and I'm like, I don't know how you guys. I have one that has three kids. I'm like, you live in a totally different world than I do, and it's fantastic, and I'm glad that you have those kids. But like, I don't know how you do it. I don't know how
So
you afford it.
how did you supervise? Were you in positions where you had people who reported to you and you made decisions for your team? Okay, so you had teams. How how did you supervise and relate, not even relate to, just understand and accommodate or not accommodate women who had children, and did you think that was important? Did that change over time? Did you come to grow to realize, like, did you at first think they shouldn't get any special treatment, or then later realize it's not special treatment? Everyone has their own issues, and maybe the company needs to be aware. What were your thoughts, especially as a boss, because you must have had some women who worked for you that did have children.
Oh yeah, I mean, and men that had children. Yeah, I
Sure.
mean, I think that
But the default parent thing is something women talk about a lot. Like the man,
yeah,
not always, but the man isn't usually the one getting the call from school. You got to come pick up your kid, they're sick, or having to rush out of the meeting, or not go to the meeting, or not go to the evening event because I got to be there to pick up my kid or take her to dance or whatever.
yeah. No, I mean, and that's true. I mean, I think part of the reason why I was able to have um sensitivity to that. I've got two sisters and they each have kids. And so I think, and, I mean, I have a psych background. I think that there's in that, I mean, the empathy and I'm not anybody's manager now, but I was told before that I was a pretty good manager because and that goes back to the flexibility that I expected for myself, I expect for other people. And so if you're not getting your work done, that's a different story, but it's not butt in seat. Like I do your work wherever. Do your work on the train? That's fine. I don't care. Do your work at night? I don't care. I mean, the client meetings you should be able to make, but if you can't, then have somebody come in and stand in for you. Like just get it done. It doesn't, and I think the leaving early and the when the kids are sick and then they get sick, like when you have kids, then you're sick more. Like it's just like it's another whole side of life that I think that it would be insane if I didn't um understand that people have that. It's just like arguing with gravity. Like you've got kids and you have responsibilities when you have kids. So go take care of your kids.
Hmm. So, having spent all those years in user experience and you're still in it, you have to understand, the user profile as it changes from one person to another, your psych background. So it's easier for you, maybe than others, to step into somebody else's shoes and say, okay, I've got to really understand the psychographic, elements of this person and why they make the choices they do and what's going to appeal to them and so on and so forth. So tell me a little more about, the workshops that you do and why this appealed to you so much that you sort of fell into this career and you just stayed with it, grew with it, and then started a whole business around it.
Yeah. So I think so what happened is I started off in just in design, like, wireframes and user experience basically and web design and application design. And then I realized pretty quickly that I'm not great at that. I'm good at design sort of direction, strategy, but I'm not the best at, sitting down and actually doing the boxes and arrows. And so then I moved more into strategy side of things where it's the research and the talking to the customers and talking to the clients. And then I realized I sort of bumped into, well, like this sort of service design aspect of things where you're thinking about the customer experience, the sort of the front of the house, but then you're also thinking about the employee experience, like the back of the house. So you're not putting on employees and requesting of them or expecting of them something that they're not capable of because they won't get that done. And so the way to have a realistic strategy is to think about, what it is that you want for your customers, what it is that your employees are capable of, and then filling the gap between the two. And not just like wringing more out of your or out of your employees, because then people are going to leave and a happy employee equals a happy customer, an unhappy employee literally equals an unhappy customer. So it's about thinking about the humans on each side of things. And so I kind of just stumbled into that based on when I was in agencies. It was like the work that I requested, and I was in the a subject matter expert, so I was a lot involved in a lot of the business development side of things. So when we would be going and talking to prospective clients, I would be able to sort of like pull them along in this direction so that they knew that that was the kind of work that we were able to do. So yeah, it was sort of a it was like a designed serendipity, if you will. Like I had designs, I had ideations, but then it was like, the luck of being able to find the clients that I was able to do this with and that could afford it, because it was expensive, and it was also sort of like you're not getting 20 wireframes after this work. You're getting a 3-year roadmap to tell you more work to do. So it's like you had to have the appetite to be able to say, we actually really want to change. And there was a lot of sort of change management that came with these conversations where you're going to be working differently now because we have different expectations. So that was the psychology background. And I think that probably back to like what you were talking about with the employees or with my teammates too, was like, well, just the realisticness of like, this is what we can expect from the situation that we have. And we'd be crazy to think that we had a different situation. So let's design what we can with the constraints that we have.
Hmm. So you know so much throughout all of this journey of your career and your life. And when you look back at an earlier version of yourself and you think, ooh, if I knew then what I know now, is there anything you would change?
Yeah, I would have gone to business school.
Business school. So, did you get your master's? Did you get your MBA?
Mm.
Okay.
No, I got a master's degree in human computer interaction.
So, you would have gotten an MBA.
Yeah.
And would that have been because you wish you had had that knowledge sooner, because you thought it would have helped you get promotions and better pay? Was it all of the above, or would you have just gotten the respect that you felt you deserved and didn't get?
I think it was more about because I wasn't militant, I would say, but I think that I was a little bit more stringent in terms of like, well, we need to do this because this is the customers, da da da. We need to, this is for the good of the customers. And then it was like, this is a business. Like, how are we? This isn't a commune, this is not a volunteership. And so I think if I'd been able to, and I can do it now, it's sort of what I've been focusing on in my career as of late is finding those the customer value or the customer experience from a business value perspective. So then we can talk to some of the people who are making decisions to say, well, no, this isn't just a nice to have. This is this is either helping you save money, make money, or reduce risk. And this is how. So customer experience is a lever that you can pull to have, increase or decrease business value. And I think that had I, I mean, or maybe it's maybe gone to business school, gotten an MBA, or just like had this epiphany 20 years ago, I think that I would have had different conversations and maybe been able to expand my reach within a customer set or client set had I been able to have more of a, you know, mollifying bring you along. Let me show you why customer experience is actually good for you, what's in it for you, rather than like, no, you need to do it because this is what you need to do.
So you really had that empathy and understood the customer's needs and could express that, but weren't speaking the language of the ROI that the executives needed to hear. So you might have been or became over time more effective as you understood how to put it into their language because the
Yeah.
ROI a lot of times is all that really matters. And
Yeah, I mean, they have to make decisions and
right,
you decide based on the return on your I mean, it makes sense. And
yeah.
if you don't think about if you keep I mean, the way that a lot of organizations think of customer experience as a cost center, and they're right to do that if we don't prove that it isn't and that it is a value maker.
hmm And do you think at any point in the future you would go back and get an MBA just because, like, I want to still do that? Because you can, right? We can do anything we want anytime we want in life.
I'm constantly taking classes and doing things. So I think that I've sort of like cobbled together some
You
of that
have an
information.
informal MBA.
I do. I mean, I wouldn't say that because there's no way I'm going to be able to do like a, cost analysis of anything anytime soon. But I think, no, I don't know if I would want to go back and do like a concentration in a business. But I do love continued education. I always say that, consistent learning I think it's a fountain of youth. I think it's just the way to stay young. So
Mm,
not necessarily going with a briefcase into a, university or like logging on, and I think it's too much right now. Maybe if I can kind of coast a little bit more and quit doing all of this, unpaid marketing that I've been doing, maybe I would look into it. But I think I'd rather take a sewing class.
mhm. And that's another thing we have in common. I truly believe lifelong learning, like you said, the fountain of youth keeps you motivated, inspired, and just gives you a new well of ideas. I listen to audiobooks, and when I'm relaxing, I'll watch a YouTube video to learn about business.
Yeah,
That's relaxing to me. On the
yeah.
couch instead of watching something mindless or scrolling. So I appreciate you sharing that because that's something I definitely support and want to spread to others. And if you were inspired by today's story, we want you to remember to share it with a friend, leave a review, and subscribe to meet our next amazing guest. If you want to invest in a solution to the childcare crisis, check out MomSub's equity crowdfunding campaign at momsub.com/invest or connect with MomSub on our social media pages. That's MomSub, like a substitute mom. Our mission is for you to discover what you want in life. Ask for it, pursue it, find help, and get it. Reducing your stress, your guilt, your self criticism, and increasing your calm, confidence, and clarity along the way. So remember, your career and your choices and your success are yours to define. So keep pushing boundaries and spreading your love and encouragement to other women who need it.